In the summer of 2013, on one of the weekends, I was sitting with a friend of mine in a pub in Bangalore. You know how all great stories start with beer? So did this. His name is Nikhil, and he was my roommate in college. I was meeting him after almost 5 years, which is very strange because we used to be practically inseparable in college. The reason why I was meeting him after such a long time is because he had taken up a job with an MNC in Mumbai, and I had taken a job with another MNC in Bangalore, and we could never find the time to meet. But now that we were meeting after such a long time, we had a lot to catch up on. And so that evening, as the evening progressed, we talked a lot about the things that were happening in his life and mine, and also went through an amazing amount of beer. But as we were talking, something really interesting struck me. That despite all the education, difference in our education, our innate proclivities and interests, our lives for the last 5 years had been remarkably similar. And this is strange because me and Nikhil were very different people. You know, he was studying to be a mechanical engineer. I was studying to be an electronics and communication engineer. He was spending his time in lathe machine workshops, cutting and sawing stuff, and I was working in digital electronics workshops. Right? Even our social life was very different. He was an outdoorsy, extrovert kind of guy, had many friends, loved traveling. I have always been an introvert guy, preferred the solitude of my room, reading books or cooking up some cool projects. So it was really strange when that day when I met him to realize that our lives had been so similar. In fact, when we were talking about stuff, we realized that we both were working with similar kind of jobs. We were doing stuff which we didn't like. We both were somehow managing ourselves to drag ourselves out of bed, go to work, finish the work allocated to us on the timelines, just somehow manage to meet the deadlines, come back, sleep, and repeat that cycle over and over again. Our social life also became similar. We were friends with similar kind of people. We did similar kind of things on the weekend, which is primarily going to pubs and drink. So after that weekend when Nikhil left, I asked myself a very simple question, and that is, what is the purpose of my education? The answer to the question turned out to be simpler than what I had thought. You see, when I was in my 10th standard, my parents, my relatives, my teachers came up to me and said, you need to study hard. You need to make sure that you get good marks, because if you don't, it will be very difficult for you to get a good job later. I studied diligently. I believed in them, or I believed what they were saying. And I got good grades in 10th. And then when I moved on to 12th standard, the same story repeated again. Same set of people, my parents, my teachers, relatives, again appeared and said the same thing, that you need to make sure that you get good grades, or else it will be very difficult for you to get a job later on. And I studied as diligently as I could. Well, as diligently as a teenager who recently got a girlfriend could, right? So then, post-12, I came here to SMIT, and the story came back to haunt me again. Semester after semester, I was told that I need to score consistently in order to be even considered to sit for a placement interview. And to be fair to everyone, they were all true. The companies that came here for placement did have a cutoff for 10th, 12th, and all your semester marks. So at least listening to them did work out well for me that way. But when these companies came, I came out with my A game. I brushed up everything that I had learned just to make sure that when someone asked me a question, I could give them a proper answer. The college even organized special training or placement trainings for us to prepare us for these interviews. And when these interviews started, I got placed in the first company that came here itself. And I remember that it was one of the best moments in my life then. I remember the high that I felt at that point of time. But most importantly, I remember thinking that this is the reason why I studied. For all the years that I worked through all the courses to make sure I remember things and answer all the questions in the test was for this. My 10th, my 12th, and all the semesters that I studied so hard was to get a job. You see, no matter what the academicians tell you, the purpose of your education is to get a job. So that is what I realized when I asked myself that question. And the moment I realized that, I could start seeing the similarities between me and Nikhil's life, from which I initially started. You see, despite what we both were as people, right? Despite differences in our education, despite differences in our social proclivities, we were both trained for the same goal. We were both trained to get a job. No one ever told us to get a job that we love. So the moment that the first company offered us a job, we pounced upon it and we took it. And because the jobs that we took, both me and Nikhil, were so similar, and because the jobs that we do define such a major part of our life from then on were very similar. So answering this question didn't lead me to a substantial conclusion, so I had to ask myself another question. I asked myself, what is the worth of my education? To this question, I didn't have an answer. So I decided to quit my job. And I'm glad that I did, because in the quest to find those answers, I have had an amazing journey, which I'll talk about a little. You see, what happens is we are thrown into situations without asking questions. So right after college, I took a job even without asking as to what I wanted to do. But now that I had quit my job, I was free to do things that I really wanted to do, free to ask questions such as what I would want to do, what would I love to create. Remember when we were kids, we were all asked as to what do you want to become when you grow up? And kids come up with interesting answers. Some want to be scientists, some want to be painters, some want to be actors, some want to be writers. But most importantly, kids want to become things which they think are the coolest things to become. Somehow, as you grow, the question in itself loses its meaning. No one asks a teenager as to what they want to become. If you're good in maths, you're automatically expected to become an engineer. If you're good in biology, you're automatically expected to become a doctor. And if you're good at arts, well, God save you. You can roll a dice and decide to become an engineer or a doctor depending on how the dice turned out. But now that I had quit my job, I felt like that kid again. I started asking myself those questions, what I wanted to do. I asked myself, what kind of company would I want to work for? And I realized that the best kind of company that I would want to work for is the company that I would create. And I started a company. I thought what kind of work I would want to do. And I realized that I wanted to do work which had some meaningful impact. And hence I created Zuzubi as a platform that helps people form great habits, healthier habits. I asked myself questions like, what kind of people would I want to work for? And I realized that the people or the team that I need around me should be people who are really passionate about what they are doing. And that's how I started building the team. We have designers who were trained as mechanical engineers but are doing design because for the love of it. We have data scientists who have quit their job because they loved writing. We have software engineers who have quit their job because they loved numbers and are now working with us as data scientists, right? So we started hiring people who were passionate about stuff, and that's how we started creating our team. You know, we as a company, we are a long way to go, but I think in the quest to answer that question, what is the worth of my education, I, to some extent, found meaning in my own life. And so I'm here to tell two very simple things to you. First, ask more questions. You know, it's strange that our education system deliberately tries to stop us from asking questions. We are rewarded when we know the answers, right? So if you sit for a test, if you know the answers, you are the one who is going to pass, right? And to add to that, you have competition on top of it, right? So the one who knows maximum number of answers is the one who wins. We are not trained to ask questions. No one gets an A if they ask interesting questions that would even stumble the teachers. You get an A only when you answer all the questions. So we are trained to answer questions which someone else asks us, not to ask questions of our own. Ask more questions. You never know what kind of journey it will put you on. Point number two, which I wanted to share with you, is don't take a job right after college. You see, the purpose of education is to prepare us for the challenges in life. So go out and seek your challenges. Don't just slide into the comfort of a job. Give yourself 6 months, 12 months, and go figure out what you want to do. I know it sounds very scary. What will happen? What if I don't get a job later? What if I don't figure out what I want to do? What if I don't already know what I want to do? To all this, I would just say that it's okay. Taking such decisions is like jumping from a plane when you're doing skydiving for the first time. Before you do that, it's scary. You might want to turn back. You might want to change your decision just before you're about to jump. You would be very nervous. But the moment you take that jump, everything becomes magnificent. You enjoy the entire process, and things fall into way. Taking such decisions is taking like that jump. Once you take it, you'll understand how to navigate yourself. So give yourself time, figure out what you want to do, spend some time. Don't take a job right after college. Now coming back to my original question, what is the worth of your education? Or my education, rather. I don't know the answer. But in the quest to find that answer, I started asking myself more questions. I gave myself more freedom to fail. And maybe that, in a sense, is the worth of my education. Enjoy the conference.